Greetings to one and all. It's your old buddy Jay here, coming at you with another episode of Countermeasures J Play. I am just going to do a little review of the Suicide Squad because over the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks, I've been working through the campaign and posting up my gameplay. So if you've watched any of it, I really appreciate that. Started to get a few more views than usual, so that seems to be, that's good for the channel, and also, I sort of do these for myself really, and if anyone's interested, then that's great too. I've been putting up some videos where I've actually had commentary myself being videoed while I'm doing it. Um, but I've also been putting up a whole load of gameplay where I'm not in it, so maybe that's why the viewership's gone slightly higher than it normally would do. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this game. I wanted to talk about this franchise, and I would just want to talk about DC a little bit, and I want to talk about the decisions that are being made, years in advance on the direction of these kinds of games. So I'm going to start off first with what this is. So basically, the Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League is it's a co-op shooter. You play online with up to 3 other friends, so there's 4 people in total. It's created by the same company that did the original Arkham games, and I'm going to completely forget who they are, so I'm going to have to quickly look that up for 1 second, because that completely has slipped my mind. Obviously, you can tell I'm just riffing off the dome here. Yeah, so it's Rocksteady. I always forget that it's Rocksteady. Yeah, and then published by Eidos Interactive. So Rocksteady did the original Arkham game. So they did Arkham Asylum, they did Arkham City, and they did Arkham Knight, and they were, quite well known for being just really, really fun games. So what you would have is you would have in Arkham Asylum, you're in a kind of you're Batman going through Arkham Asylum, facing all his foes. Brilliant setting, echoes of the book that was done years ago. Arkham Asylum, a serious house on a serious earth, and just really well paced. Gave you all the gadgets you needed. There were loads of collectibles, loads of really interesting bad guys. The bad guy roster for Batman is far more interesting than Batman himself, I think. So they dug them all out. They had Joker and Killer Croc and all that kind of stuff. So the levels were really interesting. In Arkham City, they opened it up, put you into a city environment, a bit like a sort of smaller version of GTA. And again, that was fun, interesting bad guys. And then the third one, it's Arkham Knight, and so city's slightly larger, but you were fighting, the kind of the best of the Batman bad guys, or that they hadn't used already, or they were reusing them. So the structure of those games were very interesting. It was set up as a kind of trilogy, although there is an Arkham Origins game that wasn't done by Rocksteady that's equally as good. We wouldn't mind a remaster of that or a kind of upgrade of that. That would be quite good. But as a collection, those games got quite a high following. A lot of people really like them for lots of reasons. The combat especially was really, really good, where you could be fighting someone and then Batman would be alerted to someone attacking him, and you could do a counter button, and as that went on, that got more complex, and you could use different guns while you were fighting, sort of using grapple hooks and all this kind of stuff to take down your bad guys in different ways. So very interesting, very intricate, very well thought through. I am going to get to the point in a minute, and also, the mechanics of the whole thing held very well together. So it tied the story together, interesting story, interesting characters, gave you all of these different ways that you could solve different missions. You could do it stealthily, you could go in all guns blazing and, fight everybody off the cuff or whatever. So there was it was a really good series of games. So when they announced that they were doing a Suicide Squad game, there was obviously a lot of hype about that, because the previous games from Rocksteady had been so good. And as more information came out about it, it slowly started to dawn on everyone that what they'd done years ago was try and work out a way that they could monetize the Arkham series, and that's what they've basically done here, or they've attempted to do. And in doing so, they've pretty much destroyed what was good about those original games. And that has has a bad ripple effect throughout Rocksteady's kind of status for a start. But I also feel that it also has, it has its own qualities, but it's just not what people were expecting. So that's kind of setting the stage for where this is. So as time goes on and more things are being released about it, we realize it's like a co-op shooter. There's none of the kind of stealth stuff going on. It's really a looter shooter where there's a monetized section to the game where you can buy new skins, and you're just essentially they're trying to they're trying to sort of create a game that is interesting in one part. So they've got the kind of campaign, which is about 10 to 12 hours, and then also makes you want to come back and stay in that system so that you can grind for new loot. You can get higher XP and you can just make your character a real badass. So that's kind of where this is sitting. So I think because of that, people were disappointed. They wanted another Arkham style game where everything had been really meticulously thought through. Essentially, what this is it's like 6 or 7 chapters, and within those chapters, there's little subsections of like 8 to 9 different missions that you have to do within that. So it's not particularly that beefy. It's like sort of 10 to 12 hours, like I said. And in breaking it down like that, every section is essentially solved with just shooting your gun. So the Fortnite influence of being in a squad and solving a problem together, or that kind of Borderlands feeling, the way that you approach those games in a collective, is what they've tried to do here. And in doing so, they have essentially just dissolved what was good about the originals, the original Arkham series, which I'm going to keep referring back to because that is a gold standard as far as Rocksteady, the games that they've turned out, and that's the kind of quality that people expect, and that isn't what this is. So essentially, you are jumping around through the levels, shooting purple blotches on tanks to blow them up. There is a story looped through it all, which again, I'll get to that, but it's relatively interesting. It does try and do something different, which is that a lot of these games, the hero always wins, or there's like a kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy game. It's like collectively there's a story and some bad things happen, and then everything gets resolved in the end, and everyone's fine. Well, in this one, off the cuff, you can't call your game Suicide Squad kill the Justice League without actually having them kill the Justice League. And spoilers, they kill the Justice League. And to me, that was quite an interesting premise. I quite like the idea that actually this isn't like a game which is, traditionally what a superhero game would normally be, like the old Iron Man games that came out when the film was out, and Iron Man 2, and just terrible like shooters that are just, didn't serve the franchise in any way. So to say that this hasn't served the franchise in any way, I think is wrong, because I do think that they have picked a topic here which is interesting and it's different and it's maybe not what people were expecting. So that's in terms of story and like the campaign and how the beats go. The gameplay, like I've said before, I feel like they just threw aside all of those cool gadgets that Batman had and all of the kind of quirky things you could do, even when you were playing as like Robin or Nightwing in, I think, Arkham Knight, where you could flick over to different characters and stuff. That was far more interesting. They had loads of gadgets and different things, different ways to fight. And it reminds me a little bit of the Guardians of the Galaxy game where, one moment you're Peter Quill with your pistols, the next moment you're Gamora and you've got your sword, so you had different ways to kind of, each character could fight. But in this, you have 4 characters. So you have Deadshot, who has a gun. You have Boomerang, who has a gun. You have Harley Quinn, who has a gun, and you have King Shark, who has a gun. So they have their kind of specials, which is like, Boomerang does throw a boomerang as his kind of melee attack, and Harley's obviously got a hammer and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, it's the same character. So the only real choice that you have to make at the start. Sorry, I've left this on a quite a boring screen. Let me find another one. The only real kind of interest the decision you have to make at the start is how you want to traverse the world. So Deadshot has a jetpack, so that's a no-brainer for me. I played my entire playthrough with Deadshot. Then you've got Captain Boomerang. He throws his boomerang, and he has like a flash gauntlet, which means he zips to where his boomerang is. That's interesting. King Shark just jumps. That's fine. And Harley has Batman's grapple gun, which is like the slowest way to move across the map. So eventually as time goes on, you kind of go through your talents and you kind of start to fill them out. And I didn't really, I just concentrated on Deadshot. So and building up like his jetpack and the kind of better kind of chances of getting XP through play, etc., etc. So that was it. I mean, yeah, you could have chose any character really. It's really the traversal that was different. So from that perspective, not really that interesting, but fine. They don't, apart from their sort of finishing moves, they don't give you the option to like, Gamora's sword or Drax's knives or anything. You don't really have the option to kind of use those. So yeah, you're essentially playing as the same character. So story-wise, so I'm jumping around a little bit because I haven't bothered making any notes. I'm doing this sort of post finishing the game a day or two later. So I'm just recalling, the key elements that I thought worked and didn't. So in terms of the story's fine. Yeah, I mean, you're fighting Brainiac, who's ultimately the big bad guy, and he's taken over the Justice League. So what you'll do is you'll do a few kind of like incidental missions where you have to shoot purple blobs in order to get a certain amount of digital assets or something that enabled you to get into a building, or which is few and far between. You're mainly just jumping around the map, and then that eventually leads you to a boss fight, which I thought, out of all of them, all of the little filler missions and whatever, they were boring. I didn't really enjoy doing any of that. But the actual boss fights were quite fun. So the Flash was a good one. He's jumping around. You have to like counter him before you can shoot him. And then you fight. Who do you fight next? There's Flash. Then Green Lantern. He's zipping around. You have to counter him and then shoot him. So that's that. And then you fight Batman. But actually, Batman's one's quite interesting because it's all about fear. So you're sort of walking through the Batcave and trying to not get caught out by these weird sort of fear statues. Again, it's fine. They just decided to change it because otherwise you'd just be fighting them when they're zipping around, counter them and shoot. Then you fight Superman and he's zipping around and you counter him and shoot. So basically the boss fights are just cut and pasted each time, except for the Batman one, which is slightly different. So in terms of that, boss fight's not that interesting. Minute-to-minute gameplay, not that interesting. I felt like the spectacle of what was going on screen was really cool. I mean, it was like stuff flying everywhere, and there's like you're doing a backflip and you're flying on your jetpack and shooting your gun and reloading in the air, and you can hover and shoot and take people out and throw grenades, and so there's all this stuff going on. So when you look at it in its entirety as a collective, it looks really impressive. So for those short gameplay segments, it's like, wow, this is brilliant. But then when you're actually playing the game itself, how it feels, your movement, everything felt a little bit slow. I wanted to just have a little bit more urgency about it, and it didn't really feel like it had that. Your interactivity with the group is non-existent, so you don't have any as far as I played through on my own, so maybe if you're playing with a couple of other people, real human beings rather than bots, maybe there's some kind of crossover that you can do in terms of like joining powers or something. I didn't see any of that. I'm assuming it's not there. It didn't. Everything else was very hand-holdy, telling you exactly what things could do. At no point did they say, if you're standing next to Harley Quinn, you can do a kind of joint finisher or anything like that. So that was completely left out. I mean, even the Knight not Arkham Knight, but whatever the recent one was where Batman was killed at the start. I can't even remember what it was called. Knights of Gotham or something like that. Even they had crossovers with the characters you were using that could have different setups to finish the mission or finish a character you were fighting or whatever, but none of that in here, so they left all of that out. Obviously you can see from this there's like a great big map, so you can go over all these places and do all of these missions. There's kind of, you've got like a yeah, all of it's to kind of collect bits and pieces to kind of enable you to then go and fight another Brainiac and do all this kind of stuff. Apparently, you find out there's 13 Brainiacs. You only have to kill one to complete the campaign, but then obviously they want you to come back and just keep building up and whatever. I have no incentive to go back whatsoever. The side missions were completely and utterly irrelevant to me. So as I was going through, usually with these games, you're like, oh, I can do some side missions to kind of build up my XP to build my character up. I was OP from the minute I started. So I didn't feel the pressure when I was fighting big groups of enemies at all. I got knocked down, but I have like 2 revives, so I would always get revived, even in boss fights. I mean, other than Superman, I think the others I more or less did the second time, just by the time I'd worked out the patterns of what was going on. So not really a great challenge. And the Superman one was just like luck. A lot of that was just luck because you kept getting knocked down, then it would pick you back up, and eventually he would win, and then you just keep doing it. And it was really just kind of being. It essentially came down to like being able to counter him at the right moment. And if you were flying and then you kind of fell behind a building, you couldn't do it. So really, it was like that kind of obstruction wasn't the difficulty of the gameplay as such, more the way that that particular mapped area hadn't been really thought out in a way that was that enabled you to play it in the way that you would want to play it, and actually make the boss a challenge rather than the biggest enemy being just the buildings and the rocks surrounding you. So I didn't really think that worked very well. The cutscenes are egregious, so they're incredibly long and slightly unnecessary, but to be honest with you, it got to a point where I was quite looking forward to them just so that I didn't have to play the game. So I'd sort of finish a bit and I'd be like, thank God that's over. And then I'd settle down for like a sort of 5 minute cutscene of them all bantering together. So what started off being quite annoying ended up being quite entertaining towards the end of the game. So that had a rocky start, but then ended up being a positive. I don't know what that says about the game, but if you're looking forward to the cutscenes more than you are actually in game, playing the game in gameplay, then that tells you everything you need to know. I mean, like I said, OP. So my character became incredibly OP from the start. I didn't really feel threatened in any way when I was engaging, which is probably why I found it quite boring. There's all these kind of side missions that you could do from like characters that you meet that set you up to do separate things to earn XP and to earn different points and things like that. I didn't really do any of that. I didn't see the need to do it, so they became completely redundant to me. Also, I feel like at some point someone did all of this and then thought, hang on a minute, there's not that many collectibles. In fact, there are no collectibles really. At least with Batman, you would kind of walk around parts of the city and you'd pick things up, and like there'd be like Penguin's umbrella or like things like that, and they just didn't have any of that in this. They shoehorned the Riddler tests, the little tasks that he has in I think it's Arkham Knight. I don't know if he's in the other two, but he's certainly in Arkham Knight, which I hated in Arkham Knight, and they were even more annoying in this, so I didn't hardly do any of those. I just feel it was really disappointing that they had all this potential. I mean, the map isn't that big either. If you look at the size of Metropolis, it's like relatively small in comparison to something like Arkham Knight, which did feel much bigger. And I feel like that's again another down point. The voice acting was very good. I actually thought that the character interactions were really good. I thought all the mocap was really good. I am going to say that like the writing, it's come under some criticism because I think when you've gone through all of those other things that I've just checklisted, and you've realised that like the game isn't that great, the next thing to basically say is, oh, the writing's crap as well, and just write the whole thing off. Well, actually, having spent some time quite enjoying the cutscenes, I do think the writing was relatively good in terms of dialogue and in terms of the interaction between your characters. There were some genuinely funny laugh out loud moments. I don't, I love comedy, obviously, like everybody does. There are some games that make me laugh. There aren't many, but this did have me laughing out loud a few times. I particularly liked King Shark. I know they went down a kind of Drax route. but the his kind of ability to kind of point out the obvious and all that, and not understand metaphors. They tried to do a bit of that in this, and I think it worked really well. I actually think it works slightly better than Drax. I find Drax a little bit boring and predictable, whereas I felt like King Shark was just a little bit more interesting and not quite so dumb. And again, the Harley Quinn actress was really good. This was Kevin Conroy's, I'm going to say it's his last outing as Batman, because there's a big sign at the end that says something like "Thanks for everything, Kevin," or "We love you, Kevin," or something like that. He unfortunately, well, he was the voice for all the Arkham series, but also for the TV shows, the animated series, and who basically, whenever they need a Batman voice, he was the guy. Unfortunately, I believe he died of cancer earlier in 2023. So I think this might have been his last big project. I think there's another thing that he did where he did some voiceover stuff, but I believe that generally this is considered to be his last main project. So, and again, he was good in it. But they took everything that was good about the Arkham series and just kind of span it on its head and annoyed everybody. So the fact that he was in there doing his best, I think, fair play to him. Um, yeah, and the Deadshot guy, I mean, he was probably the weakest voice actor. I wasn't mad about his voice acting, but his interactivity with the other characters, I mean, he's generic soldier man, so his interactivity again was fine. So I think generally that bit was good. I quite enjoyed some of the writing of that. Again, but when I say writing, I mean writing as in the dialogue and interaction between characters. I don't necessarily mean the pace of where the story, where the story going or what the plot beats are, of which I wasn't really that bothered. It was pretty generic. You kind of kill the Justice League and then you fight Brainiac, and that's the end of the story. So that's kind of more or less a summary of the whole my experience with this game in its entirety, from its roots, from the key gameplay, from the presentation. I do think it looks quite good. Like I said, when everything's happening on screen and you've got this quite beautiful city, it does all look pretty good. So that definitely has uh, something going for it. Um, and I just feel that, like, the overall kind of plot wasn't that great. Like I said, the interaction between characters I thought worked quite well. I think the biggest problem that I have with this franchise is that I don't really like the Justice League, right? So you'd think this would be a perfect game for me, but equally, I'm not that mad about the Suicide Squad either. I feel that, like, I'm a graphic designer by trade, but I also draw comic books, and I have done for a long time. And I've obviously been into comics since I was a kid, so I followed all of these books since the early 80s, right? So I've been reading DC and Marvel for a long time, and Image Comics, and lots of different indies, etc., etc. And there are ways to do these kind of larger stories that work well, and there are ways to do them not so well. And I feel that, like, what was missing out of this was a kind of figurehead for the main character. If they hadn't have tried, because the story itself, it doesn't matter which character you are, the story plays out the same, right? If you had four different characters where it was four different stories that plotted out that maybe followed the general beats but came together at certain points, but they were different stories, I'd now be encouraged to go back and play through as Harley, or I'd be encouraged to go back and play through as King Shark. But because they're all the same, I'm not interested. And also, the characters are not that interesting. Somebody told DC that Harley Quinn was like the best thing since sliced bread, and I think she might be one of the worst. She was fine as a supporting character, but you've only got to look at films like Birds of Prey or any of the kind of standalone comics. They don't do that well. She's not a strong enough kind of character to sort of pull it off by herself. She's interesting as a sideline or as part of a group, but I don't think she works very well as a singular character. I don't think Deadshot does either. I don't think King Shark does either. I don't think Boomerang does. And bringing them together, I don't think that really works for this game either. The first Suicide Squad film was not very good. The second one was good because of James Gunn. But again, they it's not that interesting. I never really liked Superman as a kid. I always thought like he was like he wasn't interesting to me because like the stakes in every comic book were not very high because he can do everything. He's indestructible. He's, okay, every now and again they get the kryptonite out, but you can't do that for every issue. It's boring. They do it in this. It's like they didn't do anything interesting it's the only thing that they can bring out to kind of fix it. So other than that, he's just so OP. So the most interesting was Batman. So what would have been more interesting for me would be like maybe this game should have been like from Batman's perspective. What is the story of them all getting taken over? That would have been so much more interesting. Maybe Batman has to fight the rest of the Justice League. That would have ticked a lot of boxes for the fan base. It would have also made it. I mean, okay, if you want to make it a shooter or whatever, then you can do that. Just they didn't hesitate with the Zack Snyder films with Batman with massive machine guns on his car. So you could do that with this. So I feel like that just sort of fails in that way. And I am a little bit sick of all of these, like DC and Marvel, bringing out all of these like characters that just weren't very good in the comics, and they're somehow like bringing them into film and telling everybody that they're these amazing characters. And the feeling generally is the same kind of feedback that you get from the comic books, which is like, well, we don't really like them. I mean, you've only got to look at like basically everything on Disney Plus for Marvel. So like the She-Hulk TV series, just terrible. And again, a character in the comic books that I didn't like as an individual character, but as an ensemble, I thought she worked quite well with the Fantastic Four and things like that. So I just feel like it would be good to kind of get back to the roots. I mean, Marvel going away and then potentially coming back with a load of really cool X-Men films, that's interesting to me. I'm less interested in all the sideline characters and even Guardians of the Galaxy to a certain degree, which is like by the time the third film came along, I was like, this is fine. It's just wrapping up. Please don't do any more. The Guardians of the Galaxy game, which I played start to finish, I actually think is worse than this because it doesn't, aside from the moment where you can interact with other characters to solve various different things, that one was really on rails, kind of walk down this corridor, shoot, solve problem, walk down next corridor, shoot, solve problem. So at least this is open world, level open world as much as the world isn't that big, but you can pretty much roam anywhere. There's just nothing to do. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything that I want to say about this game. I do feel slightly let down by it because it would have been nice if it had been a continuation of the Arkham series. I understand now that it's not and it's a shooter, so I have to, judge it based on that. In its kind of looter shooter kind of genre, is it good? Well, not really, because like things like Fortnite and Destiny and the Division and all those kind of games, they do everything so much better than this game does. Like every aspect of this is just broken in comparison. Like I said, characters way too OP to start with, so I had no desire to kind of grind anything. The contracts that I think I did like one contract from this little side character. You could change the looks, which was probably about the most fun thing. In fact, I'm going to have to say that King Shark's outfit is easily the best thing in the game. But again, you only got that if you pre-ordered the Justice League version, and it was like £100 or 90 quid or whatever. So it's just too much money. Yeah, I think it's a pass. It's a hard pass. If you're not that interested, then I wouldn't suggest you play it. I would wait until it comes out. It will be free to download on PlayStation Plus in the coming months. Free, I mean, you've only got to look at games like this. Games that have tried to do this similar kind of trying to build like an ecosystem of people coming back and playing different missions. They've got this, like the Division. I love the Division, but then they would come out with like weekly updates and new side missions and stuff, and I would go back and eventually get bored of that. I did the same with Division 2. I mean, Avengers, they just pulled the plug on it. That doesn't even exist as an online thing anymore, as far as I'm aware. So why they thought they would be the ones to break into it, I guess because it has that kind of Fortnite hook, people wearing interesting costumes. But you have to go into the store to purchase any of those. And some of these, and I thought like, oh, okay, fine, So look, if I want to buy that, I can't buy it So then I need to let's have a look. Yeah, I can't buy any of those because they're like you have to have Lex bucks. But then when you go in to buy Lex bucks, it's like ridiculous. Like 40 quid will probably get you like one DLC pack, maybe two. And I just feel like it's just disgusting, basically. This kind of, I know that it's cosmetic, it's not a kind of pay to win scenario, so you don't have to go into it, but I just don't feel like, I might want to spend money on a Call of Duty one because, maybe I go back to that more. But with this, like the kind of the incentive to return is incredibly low. So why would I invest in any of this? There is talk about a whole load of DLC stuff coming out for this. I might pop back into that and see what that's like. I think there's a Joker DLC coming up, but again, I'm not that interested in it. I feel like it's been done before and better. And I think the sad thing is that they've got a brand here that I'm not that mad about. Fine, other people are. They ostracized a huge fat part of their fan base, and I'll tell you why. Which is I was going to play through this on my own, and then I thought, well, actually, my son is 9 and he likes playing Fortnite, and I thought, okay, great, this would be a great one for us to maybe play together, so that he could be one of the other characters, and I'll be whoever, and we can just play through the missions together. And I thought that he might find them quite interesting, and the general kind of ease of play would fit in with how he likes to approach games, which is like run around, shoot things, don't have to overthink. There's not loads of collectibles. The progression's pretty easy, so I could see him spending some time with it and then just going on to something else. That's fine. But where they ostracize their fan base is that, or protect the potential for a younger audience, is they made it for adults. So like I can't switch off the blood and gore, which isn't very good anyway. I can't switch off any of the kind of uh, the swearing or anything like that. So for me, I instantly thought, well, I don't, he can play this later in his life, and by the time he's old enough to play it, this just won't exist anymore. So I just don't know who it's for, really. Maybe there's that kind of like 16, 18-year-old plus demographic that absolutely love this, but I'm just sick of seeing franchises come out and we're told that we should love them because they're classics, and they never were. It's just so fake. It's people's aversion to doing something new by leaning back on IP that has a track record. It doesn't have to necessarily be a good track record. That's why you're seeing films like The Fall Guy come out. I mean, who remembers The Fall Guy? Me and a selection of other 40-plus-year-olds, but no one else. And it wasn't very good back then. But now there's a Ryan Gosling movie coming out, and everyone's like, remember The Fall Guy? So it suffers from a little bit of that, which is like, again, the Suicide Squad when I was a kid, the comic books, Task Force X, they weren't very good, but they're trying to build them. They have to build on something. No one wants to invest in something that doesn't have a kind of a history that, has some kind of sort of has its claws in the 80s basically, which is where all these IPs are dug up from. All the Ghostbusters reboots and all of that stuff is just I'm just getting a bit bored of seeing it, and this is just another one of those brands on the list, and quite frankly, if I don't see anything to do with Suicide Squad ever again, I'd be more than happy, except Peacemaker. That was a good TV series. James Gunn did a really good TV series there. But other than that, yeah, I'm not mad about it. So that is my review for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I am going to give this a 2 out of 10. I'm sorry, it's a total fail. It had some good things going on in it, but unfortunately not enough to carry it through. I would be surprised if this is still around in 12 months, but I guess we'll see what happens with the DLC. So maybe I'll be back and I'll change my mind, but it seems unlikely. So until next time, be good, stay safe, and be kind to one another. Peace out. We gone.